So I'd like to thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to see 42 Balloons, so I'm excited to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me. This
Of
is
course, and
exciting.
thank you. And so for the first part, can you please explain a little bit about yourself for those who don't know who you are?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Jack Godfrey. I am a musical theatre writer, composer, lyricist. I'm based in London, in the UK, and I have written a number of shows, including 42 Balloons. I've also co-written a show called Babies that was on in London last year, and I'm also writing a show called Hot Mess, which is going to be at the Edinburgh Fringe this summer, as soon as I get back from Chicago, doing 42 Balloons.
That's awesome. And so before we get into your writings, we're gonna talk a little bit about yourself. So what got you into theater?
That's a great question. I think growing up, I was always like music was my passion and songwriting was my passion before theater. Like when I was a teenager, I started writing songs really because my dad always wrote songs growing up, but kind of not like professionally, just like he would write a song about dinosaurs when we were kids and we would all like sing it together. So growing up, I was always like really passionate about music and I learned the piano and the guitar and I started writing songs when I was like 13, 14. And I guess always like I'd always thought that I was going to be like a pop song writer, like write songs for Beyonce or whatever. That was always like what I thought I would end up doing. And then when I was a student at university, my brother was doing a film degree at the same time, and he wanted to make a musical film. And he basically asked me to write the songs for this film because he knew that I wrote songs. And I decided, sure, like why not? We get involved and do it. And I wrote the songs for this film. It was, he won't mind me saying it was not a good film. It was very kind of we were still learning our craft in many ways. But I really kind of caught the bug for telling story through songs and writing songs for characters and using lyrics in kind of like clever ways and trying to think of clever rhymes and trying to think of like silly jokes within songs and all of that stuff. Really, at that moment, I was like, "Wow, this is what I love doing." So, kind of from then on, like I just started studying musical theatre, and I guess like growing up, I knew like Les Miserables, and I knew like Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which is a show that every single child in the UK does several times. Um, but then at that point, I was like 22, I think, and I was like, wow, I really want to like kind of get into this and learn as much about it as possible. And that kind of began my journey into the world of theatre.
That's awesome. And so who are some of your biggest inspirations as a musical theater writer?
That is a great question. I think that kind of like, I feel like everyone would probably say this, but Sondheim is such a big inspiration. I mean, I like reading his books on his lyrics. I think they're called Finishing the Hat and Look, I Made a Hat. It was like kind of two
I
volume
think so,
books, and
yeah.
I have both of those. I remember really like going through those in great detail and just really like I love his meticulous obsession with detail because that's something that I also feel like I have as a writer and really like going into every line and being like, can I make this any better? Like, have I really mined everything out of this? And I really love the kind of puzzle of lyric writing. I think often it's a bit like doing a kind of like a crossword or a kind of like a word puzzle or something. It's like, how can I communicate this meaning in this number of syllables with the stresses on these particular beats that also rhymes with this word, and how can I fit all of the information in that I need to fit in? So he's a big inspiration. I mean, so growing up, I was always really into hip hop, like before I was into musical theatre. So when I discovered Lin-Manuel Miranda's shows, when I discovered In the Heights for the first time, I really had a moment of like, wow, this is like my two loves combined. So and again, I'm really giving you the obvious answers here, but Lin-Manuel Miranda is like a big one for me as well. I think also I see myself as someone who writes in the kind of like pop style and so obviously his music being in that kind of more poppy kind of like hip hop slash R&B kind of world, but also feeling like very musical theatre is another thing that really inspired me. I'd also say another kind of one that I'd add in there is Toby Marlowe and Lucy Moss, who wrote Six, and I'm like very fortunate to know them as well, which is amazing. And I think they're such geniuses. And every time I listen to their stuff, I'm so inspired because I think it's so clever, and their lyrics are so clever, and their songwriting is just kind of every time I hear something, I'm annoyed because I'm like, how did you think of that? It's your brains are so like incredible. So yeah, those are three for now. I feel like it changes all the time, but those are the
Yeah.
ones that I'll give you for now.
Yeah, those are great inspirations. And so, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received from another actor or writer?
Wow, that's another. You're asking some great questions, Sam. I feel like I'm saying every question is a great question. Um, the best piece of advice. I'm trying to think. I feel like when I started writing, I when I started writing musicals and when I got into that, I kind of did these real like deep dives into like um, listening to other writers talking about the process of writing. And there's an amazing video online which is Stephen Schwartz talking about writing Wicked, and it's basically him going through the process of writing the song "The Wisdom Eye" for Wicked and kind of showing like early drafts of the song and like his kind of first draft and then working on it a bit more and showing the kind of evolution of the song from like the first version to the final version. And I remember watching that video and really, really kind of being so inspired by seeing the process and how he kind of was so obsessed with not kind of just being satisfied with the first thing and really giving it lots of goes. So I've never met Stephen Schwartz, but I feel like from afar the kind of advice that he's given me was really like you have to just keep going until you found the right thing. And writing a musical is so much a process of rewriting rather than a process of writing, because your first draft is never the thing that ends up being on stage. And so that wasn't something I received directly, but that's definitely stuck with me as like when I started out doing this and I watched that video, I was like, okay, that is such an important part of the process.
Yeah, for sure, that's great. And so we're gonna jump into one of your, I don't know how recent it was, but Baby's the musical. And so what is the what is Baby's the musical about for those who don't know?
Yeah, absolutely. So Babies is a musical about a class of what we would call year 11 students. I think probably in America you would call that 11th grade or maybe 10th grade. I'm not sure. They're kind of 15,
I,
16-year-olds.
I think that's about 10th grade for us.
Okay,
There's some
10th grade.
16-year-olds in 11th grade, so like 10th and 11th grade.
Okay, right. So we call that year 11, and basically it kind of follows this group of students in school who are all given robot baby simulator dolls as part of a kind of teen pregnancy project in a school, and they have to look after these dolls for a week. And it kind of follows each of these nine characters in the show and their kind of different experiences looking after their babies. So some of them love their babies and feel really close with them. Some of them absolutely hate their babies. Some of them, there's a kind of couple who are kind of pretending to be like parents looking after their babies, and they kind of, have a big dramatic breakup. And it kind of, it's basically all about these young people who are feeling the pressure to be adults kind of too quickly, and kind of learning over the course of the show that they don't need to have everything in their lives worked out by the age of 15, 16. But the kind of style of music, I wanted to write something that reminded me of being a teenager. So it's kind of in this like kind of indie punk pop rock style. I was always obsessed with bands like Busted. I don't know if you know Busted. They're like a British kind of
Yeah.
pop rock band. There's definitely like kind of One Direction influences in there as well. I would say things like or what they called Wheatus is one. I would say what are the other bands like Sum 41. Do you know the kind of like that kind of genre of like kind of
Yeah.
punk pop? Paramore is another kind of big inspiration. So I wanted to write a score that really felt like it was in this kind of like rocky, kind of edgy, like angsty teen world. And yeah, we did the show in London last summer at the Other Palace Theatre, which is a kind of like off West End
Yeah.
theatre in
That,
London.
that's great. And so, jumping forward to most recently, you wrote the musical, which is now premiering in Chicago, 42 Balloons. And so, for those who don't know, what is 42 Balloons about? Because it's a true story that happened in the United States as well. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So 42 Balloons is inspired by the true story of Larry Walters, who's an American man. In 1982, he flew in a chair with a bunch of helium weather balloons, kind of these big, like 6 foot balloons. And he did this because he had the dream of becoming a pilot. But he wasn't allowed to fly real planes because he had bad eyesight. So he basically decided that he was going to make his own aircraft and kind of do the flight himself. So the show kind of follows Larry from the moment that he has his dream to him meeting his girlfriend Carol and kind of persuading her to come on board as well. And then the show is really about the two of them, kind of helped by some like friends and family, to like as they kind of make this kind of crazy dream come true. Um, and it's set in the 80s. The Larry actually flew in 1982, so I wanted to kind of write a score that felt very evocative of the 80s. We have lots of kind of like big 80s sounding drums and big guitars. I think also because it's a show that's all about having a dream, and it's about kind of these seemingly ordinary people who do this extraordinary thing, and the idea of like it's you and me against the world and all this kind of stuff. I wanted it to feel like very epic musically, even though the story itself is very kind of small scale and kind of in some ways, you know, domestic and kind of unassuming. I wanted to really capture this sense of like when you have this great desire to do something, it can feel like this big epic music is there, like soundtracking your life, and so it's a real kind of like big 80s sounding epic musical journey, and the whole show is sung through as well. So there's a couple of short kind of moments of dialogue, but kind of by and large it's music kind of all the way through the show, and we really wanted to give it this sense of kind of like the momentum building as we kind of like build up to the moment that Larry takes off in his chair, and the idea of being swept up in this kind of unlikely and kind of improbable dream that really happened.
Yeah, that's great. And so, how did you get the idea of 42 balloons? Because you're from the UK and it happened in the US. So how did that translate? Because it's also such a unique idea for a musical.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, I discovered the story on the internet, as I guess as so many people do nowadays. I was just kind of I started writing the show about 8 years ago. So I'm 32 now, and I was 24 when I kind of discovered the story. Just I was like on the internet. I was like looking for something to write about, and discovered this story just reading about it online, and I really just like immediately connected with it because I consider myself quite an ambitious person and like someone who also had a bit of a crazy dream in the sense that like I wanted to be a professional writer, and I come from a family of not really writers or anything like that, like not a family of people who've like worked in theatre or anything. So like I think a lot of people in my life thought it was a bit kind of ridiculous that I was kind of aiming to do this. So when I read about Larry, I was like, wow, I really like connect with this man who had this dream, and everyone kind of questioned him. And yeah, when it comes to the American side of things, yeah, I think the other part. So for me, I was fortunate enough that when I was at university, I did a year abroad in Boston in America. So I spent a year in Boston when I was 21, and I just kind of spent the whole year doing lots of music. I joined the kind of gospel choir at the university and the a cappella choir, and I joined a band, and we won the Battle of the Bands competition, and I just had like such an amazing time. I think I always kind of like have had a bit of a kind of like from afar, a love of American culture, American music, American TV and American movies. And so when I discovered this story, I kind of thought it would be a nice opportunity for me to like write about kind of this American story, but kind of from an outsider perspective, but also with kind of like a lot of kind of love and respect for the kind of like American culture, like the music which kind of has like inspired the show. So yeah, it is funny. It's definitely been a learning experience for me because when I started writing the show, like I know a little bit about the differences between British English and American English, but as I've worked on the show, and especially since being here in Chicago, I've really learned a lot about the kinds of words that Americans say and British people, you know, don't say, and vice versa. So we have doing the show in Chicago, we've brought over our two lead actors from the UK. So they're both British, but everyone else in the cast is American. And it's been really helpful because they've kind of been able to say to me, we don't use that word, or we don't say that expression or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's good to know. I'll change that line. I'll take that out. So it's been a challenge for sure. I think, and kind of, I really want the show to feel kind of as authentic as possible, and to kind of take out all of the Britishisms which have found their way in over time. But I've really kind of loved that as well. Kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, the whole Sondheim thing about being meticulous and obsessive with the details. I really love kind of going through and, figuring out how to make all the lines sound as authentic as possible. So, yeah, that's kind of the journey. And here we are in Chicago.
Yeah, that's great. And so, speaking of Chicago, how did the venue of Chicago Shakespeare Theatre come to be that venue for the North American premiere?
It's a great question. I mean, so basically, our producers. So we did the show. Just to rewind a little bit, we did the show in Manchester in England last year, and that was our kind of like premiere production, first ever production of the show, and we did it at a theatre called the Lowry Theatre in Manchester, and it went really well. It was like it was amazing to see the reaction that we got, but one of our producers, who's been with the show for about 5 years now, is Kevin McCullum, who's an American theatre producer, and he basically called me after that. I think maybe a couple of months after we finished that run, and he was like, "Hi Jack, it's Kevin here. I want to take your show to America. How does that sound?" And I was like, "Okay, that sounds great." I think basically because Kevin, along with some of our British producers, Andy and Wendy Barnes, who are a kind of husband and wife producing team, who are also amazing producers, they have a bit of a connection with the Chicago Shakespeare Theatre because that's where Six, the musical, first came in America. And so they already had a bit of a connection with that theatre. So I think they invited people from Chicago Shakespeare to watch the show, to watch 42 Balloons last year. And then I think they liked it. And I guess they wanted us to come over. So here we are, basically. I feel very lucky to be here.
Yeah, for sure. And so, you said the whole show sung through, and so without giving any spoilers, what is your favorite moment in the show?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have a couple, I'll give you a couple of moments. So, purely from a kind of composing perspective, I'm really proud of the whole end of Act One sequence of the show, which is kind of the moment that Larry takes off in the chair. So we kind of like, it's a kind of, I guess, like a 10-minute sequence of the show that begins with on the day of the flight, and it's kind of showing the like tension building as they're getting ready for him to like take off, and then he kind of takes off and we go into kind of slow motion and we go into Larry's head, and we're like kind of hearing what he's thinking about as he's experiencing this moment of finally taking off into the sky and kind of defying all the expectations that people have had of him. And then we have this kind of epic moment of him like sailing into the sky. He kind of becomes a bit of a rock star, like kind of a Freddie Mercury kind of rock star in that moment. And then it ends with a bit of a cliffhanger because he kind of like disappears into the clouds, and his girlfriend Carol is left on the ground with the radio trying to contact him. And we're like, is he alive? Is he going to be okay? So I feel quite proud of that moment because it's just very dramatic, and I like it a lot. And then another moment that stands out to me is kind of towards the start of Act Two. Spoiler alert, Larry does not die during his flight, and he lands back down on the ground and actually gave away the chair that he used to fly to a kid who happened to be in the street, just like where he landed. And I've written a song for the show, which is from the perspective of this kid who kind of sees a man coming out of the sky in a chair with balloons, and is kind of like has this moment of like their world is turned upside down, and they're like, wow, this is so incredible. So I really like that song. It just has a kind of nice, it feels very kind of like sentimental to me, and I think it's kind of like I wanted to write something about that moment where you are kind of inspired for the first time, because I think we've all had that in some way when you're young and you see something that kind of changes your perspective on the world, or kind of puts a dream in your head of like I want to do this thing. Like I know for me, there were lots of times growing up where I, might have like seen my dad playing music and be like, that's what I want to do. Or the first time I went to a concert, or, lots of moments. But I wanted to write a song about that feeling of when you witness something when you're young and it kind of changes your life.
That's great. And so, speaking of being younger, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Wow. That's another great question. What advice would I give to my younger self? Um, hmm. I think I just like in general, I feel like I don't. I don't really believe in, like, oh, I wish I could go back and like change this, because I think that we all kind of end up going down the path that we're on for like, for a reason. And I also believe in learning from experience. So I don't think there's anything that I'm like, oh, I wish I could go back and tell myself like, don't do that or do this. But in terms of general advice, I guess I would say that to myself that maybe just to like believe in myself a bit more, because I think as a writer it's so easy to question your intention, and to kind of like worry about like, oh, like, am I making the right decision? And it can be really hard. I think a lot of writers kind of can connect with this thing of like doubting the decisions that you've made and the choices that you've made, and it's very easy to get kind of I don't know, to get in too much in your own head about like, am I making the right choice? Am I not making the right choice? And I think the best thing that you can be as a writer is kind of instinctive, first of all, and true to yourself, and really like listen to yourself and not question yourself too much. I think like it's obviously important when you're getting feedback to listen to feedback, but I think if you're questioning yourself at the same time as you're trying to come up with ideas, then you're going to go astray. And the best thing that you can do is to really trust your gut and trust your instinct. So I think I would tell myself to do that more when I was younger, because yeah, it's important. It's really important.
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice. And so, speaking of advice, this next question kind of ties into the previous one. But what advice would you give to others who want to pursue acting or writing as a career?
That's a great question as well. I would say that, in my opinion, what's so important when you're working in the creative arts? Well, a couple of things. Number one, network, and really meet as many people as you possibly can. 'Cause when I first moved to London with my dream of becoming a writer, I just spent, probably the first 6 months that I was there just like staying in my room, writing songs. And I was like, if I write really good songs, then people will just find me, because it won't matter that I'm not going out and meeting all the different people who work in theatre. They'll just discover me because my work will be so good. And what I realized is that that's just not possible. You really need to put yourself out there, go to the meetings, get in touch with people, even if it's just like getting in touch with people and saying, do you want to meet for a coffee and like talk about your career, if it's someone that you look up to, or going to the like open mic nights. I did a lot of open mic nights in London for like new musical theatre work, and I met a lot of people through doing those. Going to the kind of new musical theatre events. I mean, there are lots of them in London. I don't know so much about over here, but I'm sure there are as well.
There's usually
Uh,
more in New York than Chicago, but yeah.
Right. Yes. But definitely for me, like that was a thing that it's so important, because people, a lot of people who have power and money and all of the things at the top are lazy because you just get into a habit of being like that. And I think the older, definitely, like I find it happening to myself as well, the older that you get and the more like that you've done things, the less you have to really work hard. So people aren't going to seek you out. So you have to find them. That's number one. Thing number one. I would say thing number two is the most important thing that you can be, besides being good at what you do, is being nice, because nobody wants to work with someone who isn't enjoyable to work with. And I always think like, if I wanted to not have fun when I'm at work and be paid more, then I would become like a lawyer or so do something else, a banker. I would do some other kind of job, right? Like people who work in theatre because we want to wake up every day and love what we do. So there's just no like. I think the really like when you're thinking about the collaborative process, the most important thing to be is to just be to think fundamentally like, am I treating the people I'm working with kindness, and am I being an easy person to work with? And sometimes you got to like you're going to have arguments about things, but like, am I like doing that in a positive way? And I think that's so important. Do I have any other? I feel like I had a third thing. I'll leave it at that for now, and if I remember, I'll come back to the other one. But I think those are the two most important things, I would say.
That's great. And so that actually wraps up the interview today. I'd like to thank you for joining me.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, you'll never know what my third thing was, but if we can, I'll think about it.